This week on Quality Digest Live, we'll chat with educator, author, and lean trainer Bob Emiliani.
Plus, don't be an enabler of lazy employee behavior. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for March 13th, 2015. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest editor-in-chief, Dirk Ducharme. So, how will the growing use of robots change people's lives and make a difference for society? How do teens want robots to make a difference in the future? As robots evolve from the realm of science fiction to real-world devices, these questions are becoming really increasingly important, and who better to address them than members of the generation that may be the first to fully coexist with robots in the future. DARPA is asking high school students to address these issues creatively in its Robots for Us video challenge. Students are asked to produce short videos about the robotics-related possibilities they foresee and the kind of robot-assisted society in which they would like to live. Winners of the student video contest will attend, as DARPA's guest, the DARPA Robotics Challenge, the DRC, finals to be held in Pomona, California, June 5th and 6th, 2015. This is what's cool, is in that challenge, teams of engineers from around the world will compete for a $3 million prize money as the robots they've created demonstrate their skills in the domain of disaster response. Students will also student video contest winners will also get a chance to participate in a special program in Pomona on June 7th, which will bring together students and experts in technology and society to discuss the broader implications of a robotics-rich future. What a great opportunity, right? I mean, this is great. I mean, I love stuff like this. We talk a lot about, STEM education and exposing students more and more to science and technology and engineering and math. This is kind of a creative way to do it, is have a video contest. Yeah. The winners get to go see something which is really pretty darn cool. We've covered the robotics challenge in the past down in Pomona, and it's really cool. I mean, so these high school students get to go see this firsthand and stuff. It's really a lot of fun stuff. Details on the contest can be found by following the link below, but in short, U.S. high school students, that's grades 9 through 12, interested in participating in the contest are asked to submit a 2 to 3 minute video describing their vision for a future robot-assisted society. Videos will be judged on the basis of clarity, creativity, thoughtfulness, originality, and appeal of the submitter's vision of how robots could make a difference for society. And this is becoming, the societal aspects are becoming more and more pronounced. Particularly, you see it coming up a lot for robotic assistance, particularly for elderly or disabled people, but particularly the elderly, as in first world countries, the elderly are getting older and older and older, and their children are so old that their children, I mean, you got 70-year-old children trying to take care of 90-year-old parents. It's becoming a kind of a critical issue, and robotics is seen as potentially a way to help assist with that, as well as with people with physical disabilities. Kind of interesting.
It's great, and I think that a couple of important things here in terms of the target audience that they're looking at for the DARPA challenge, this robotics challenge, is it's kids that are in high school. And again, as the story points out, as you mentioned, this is really going to be the first generation to really intimately work and interact with robots on kind of a regular basis in their lives. And the other thing is, these are people, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders who are in that arc of their life where they're really starting to think seriously about what they're going to do with their lives, with their careers. And we always talk about how we need engineers, we need people to go into those professions, and this is a great way to hook somebody, bring them in, let them see how cool it is, how much fun it is, how creative it can be. Then you have a good chance maybe getting them in to want to follow that path in college and in secondary beyond college. So
it's funny, we talk about the millennials being the first group of children, people to grow up in a completely internet society, right. And now we've got another group growing up potentially in a very robotics-intensive society. Right. Pretty interesting.
Right behind them, interesting stuff.
Yep.
Well, there's another story we have here where it also talks about technology and talks about video. A little story that's going to, I think, brighten anyone's day for anyone who's gone through that long, cold winter in the northeastern part of the country. I'm from Jersey. I grew up in Jersey.
And our
so
guest
I know.
is from Connecticut.
Our guest is going to be from Connecticut in a moment, so we know about this. Well, Neometrics Technologies, a metrology services company based in Florida, recently put out a video clip in which they scanned a snowman.
A snowman?
An actual snowman. Well, it was actually a 1 foot tall plastic snowman dressed up like Santa Claus, holding a welcome sign for some reason. But in any event, it is a snowman. I mean, it's Florida.
Yeah.
You know, what do you expect? I mean, you want a organic snowman, it wouldn't last 2 seconds down there. And, you know, anyway, it's Florida. So here's the thing. I'm going to show the video here in a moment. The data was captured with a Go scan from Creaform. You can see it right there.
We've had Creaform on the show.
And we've had the Creaform Go scan on the show before, and it's really a cool piece of technology. You can see it there. The scan was completing, and they brought that into, I believe it was Geomagic Studio software. Right. You're going to see it here in a moment on the video. They brought that scan into the Geomagic Studio software to analyze it and look at what that is. Right there, you can kind of see it going on. And there, with minimal editing, a fully closed polygon mesh, I believe, right, was created suitable for 3D printing. So anyone, even up north, can have their very own scanned snowman as a memento of this wonderful winter of 2015.
See, I want to know why they didn't just have Creaform, who's based just outside of Quebec.
Yeah.
Which has gotten actual snow.
Well, you know, I mean, it's important to have these things in Florida, because that's the cool part, is they scanned it in Florida, Dirk. You're missing the whole point.
I know. Sorry.
It's cool. So check out that video.
All right,
and find out more about it.
All right, we want to talk about another interesting article that this week that really covered a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is education and the idea of students as customers. The article, Imaginary Customers, was written by Bob Emiliani, and discusses the reluctance of many teachers and professors to view students as customers, which, if you think of it, really just boils down to a teacher's often myopic view of what a customer is. If you are at all interested in education, I encourage you to read it, because it really sets the stage, I think, for a much larger discussion on education. We're fortunate to have Bob Emiliani on the show today, but not to discuss education this time, but rather to discuss leadership, which, I don't know, in my mind, really go hand in hand. Bob's most recent book is Nobody is Exempt from Improvement, and you see it there on the screen, available on Amazon. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Well, great. No, in your book, Nobody is Exempt from Improvement, you are focusing, I thought this was interesting, on improving leadership, but you refer to treating leadership as a process. That's kind of interesting. I mean, what do you mean by leadership as a process?
Well, it's a very different perspective than what's normally taken. The focus is on improving leadership by improving the daily work that leaders do. So the traditional approach taken to improve leadership is to focus on improving a few leaders' behaviors. And while improved behaviors is necessary, it's certainly not sufficient. And by itself, if you were to just focus on improving leadership behaviors, what you find through the industrial psychologist community is that this has a very low rate of success, on the order of single-digit %. So despite a lot of time, effort, money spent on leadership training, most of which is focused on behaviors, we still have a preponderance of poor leadership. So it took me a long time to recognize leadership as consisting of many processes, 15 processes in fact. There can be a few more, but the main bulk of what leaders do is contained within 15 processes. And so let me just run through it for everybody so they understand, get a sense of this. The first one is leading and managing people. The second one is planning and budgeting. Third is workload management. Fourth, decision making. Fifth, problem recognition and response. 6, problem solving. 7, management reviews. 8, employee feedback and coaching. 9, team meetings. 10, asking questions, listening and receiving feedback. 11, information sharing. 12, developing people. 13, performance appraisal. 14, walking around and go see. And finally, 15, stakeholder engagement, where stakeholders are customers, suppliers, investors, and the community. So instead of a handful of bad leadership behaviors that need to be corrected, what we end up finding is that there's dozens of errors that can occur within each one of those 15 leadership categories, resulting in 400 to 500 individual leadership process errors. And what this tells us is that leadership is actually an error-prone activity. Most people think that because they're in a leadership position that a number of errors they make are few, but in fact, leadership is an error-prone activity, and it's much more of a amateur kind of activity than it is professional work, as shocking as that might sound.
Hey, Bob, it occurs to me as you were saying that if leadership is a process, then leadership basically could be taught then, right? I mean, if it's a process, then you should be able to, at least the process part of it should be able to be taught, regardless of whether that person is personable as a leader or has, quote, leadership potential. But the process part of it could be taught, right?
That's correct. And specifically in identifying the precise errors that people tend to make within each one of those 15 processes that I just mentioned. So it's a much more robust way of looking at leadership, and it's much more specific and actionable.
Okay.
Bob, you write in your book, improvement, I'm quoting here, improvement cannot be without purpose. The reachable goal of improving leadership processes is to improve the organization's culture as informed by leadership's thinking and actions. So to get your foot in the door of changing how a leader thinks, is it by showing him or her a different way to learn?
Yes, it is, and a better and more effective way to improve. Again, it's far more specific and actionable than what you typically find. The typical approach to leadership development is something called HR competency models, which are almost exclusively focused on behaviors. So leadership process errors are much more specific and actionable than the behavioral errors. And of course, we all know that you can't improve if you don't know about problems, and improvement is possible once these problems are recognized. And this is not a theoretical construct. This is something that I developed a few years ago, and I've used it in class, and I asked the students to come up with errors for each one of the 15 leadership processes that they see with their managers, past and present, and they have no problem in coming up with dozens of errors per category, hundreds in total.
Hey Bob, you mentioned specific things, and can you give us a couple of specific things or processes that a leader can do in order to begin a process approach to leading? Some down-to-earth stuff here.
Yeah, well, the down-to-earth stuff is first they have to recognize that the errors that they make in each one of the 15 processes, as well as the effect that those errors have on employees. These things are not for free. When leaders make errors in how they interact with employees, that causes employees to spend time thinking about things, getting stressed out about things that the leaders might have said. So there is an effect on employees' physical and mental health. So one way of approaching it is leaders can look at the errors that are identified in the book and select basically from a menu of errors. If they're honest, they'll say, yeah, I do that, yeah, I do that, yeah, I do that. And then that forms the basis for improvement. And the way you improve is simply by applying, in general, Kaizen, PDCA, scientific method, but as well as specifically standard worksheets, standard work combination sheets, and visual controls. So it's consistent in its thinking with lean principles and practices through and through.
Okay, suppose, one thing you've mentioned a couple times is that a leader has to recognize that they need to improve. Suppose you have a leader who refuses to admit that they need to improve, that they're the leader and their way is the highway, or they're perfect or whatever. What does an employee do at that point besides look for another job?
Yeah, well, that of course is a problem, and obviously a board of directors has a responsibility to hire leaders that are humble, that are able to admit that they need to improve. I titled the book "Nobody is Exempt from Improvement" for a reason, is because most leaders think they are exempt from improvement. And so it's a signal, a message. Now, what you said is indeed true, and employees suffer from leaders who don't think they need to improve. They suffer as a result of it. So I'm trying in this book to make the connection between these errors and the negative health effect and that bad leadership has on employees, because one of the things leaders are concerned about is, of course, healthcare costs. And the connection here is, well, if you improve your leadership, it has a positive effect on employee health. It's not in the leader's job description to harm employees in any way. But unfortunately, getting back to your point is, yes, sometimes you have leaders who refuse to admit they need to improve, and employees are going to have to find ways to survive that, as you know, I've done, you've probably had to do, everybody has to do, with the help of some coping mechanisms to gain a modicum of control over their life through exercise, yoga, meditation, music, what have you, sport. In those kind of situations, there's really no other choice than to do that.
Okay, well, Bob, you cover these topics and a lot more in your book, Nobody is Exempt from Improvement. I know it's available on Amazon. Anywhere else besides Amazon? Your own website by any chance?
Nope, it's Amazon. It's a Kindle book, so it's an e-book. It's not available as a print book, but it is an e-book, and it's a quick but powerful read. I think it'll be very eye-opening to people to see a completely different way of looking at leadership.
Okay. Well, Bob Emiliani, author of Nobody is Exempt from Improvement. Thanks for joining us on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Sure.
Thanks,
Take care.
Bob. Good stuff there. Yeah, a good book. Good
Yep.
read. Like he says, good quick read. A lot of powerful advice there in that article and in the book. Thanks, Dirk. Thanks,
sure.
Bob, for that. Well, we're going to continue actually right now with the theme of leadership, because Mike Figliolo is one of our regular columnists, and he wrote an article that appeared this week in Quality Digest. You can see it right there on the screen, called "Do You Enable Your Team's Poor Performance?" by Mike Figliolo.
Right.
And that
Another leadership article, isn't it?
Yesterday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Another leadership article. Mm-hmm. Good one from Mike Figliolo. That's what he talks about normally, are these issues of leadership. Well, he relates a tale of woe that many leaders and managers have experienced in their careers. The manager he's talking about here in the piece inherited a team that didn't like doing the grunt work. So the manager picked up the slack because it was more efficient to do it himself, and because he didn't have time to train them on the proper procedures. What was going on here was he inherited this team of scientists, and scientists like to be in the lab and do their science stuff, whatever that is, right? But they didn't like to do a lot of the paperwork, the filling out the forms of what the research indicated and all the stuff that really made the work actionable. Very important, of course, to obviously do that sort of paperwork. So the manager that Mike Figliolo was talking about in this particular example, basically, as I mentioned, picked up the slack. That manager did the work for the team, even though the process was set up so that the scientists would do that themselves. So, I can relate to this, Dirk, because hard as it may be to believe, or for me to say, in a former life, I was a control freak and a micromanager. Hi. My name is Mike. I'm a control freak and a micromanager. I know you can't believe that when I say that.
No.
I know that you're shocked. I can see it in your face that you're just surprised to hear that I had this problem. Had this problem,
yeah.
in the career, in a past life. But
it's a 12-step program.
So I know this. I know this very, very well. And in the due course of a few short decades, I learned that it's better really to let people do their own work. And it's better in a lot of ways and for a lot of reasons. First of all, not the least of which is that you yourself are going to get burnt out. If you do everybody's work for them, if you're a manager and you don't trust people to do their own work, you do it all for them, you're going to get really burned out. You're going to get overloaded with kind of minutia and stuff that it's work, it's important, but it's not your best use of your time. And that really ties into the second loss. That's the loss to yourself. The second loss is the loss to the organization, because if you are put into a management position, you're there because you have a unique and interesting set of skills. And if you're spending all your time doing the minutia that your team are supposed to be doing, the organization isn't going to get your best you either, because you're bogged down doing all that other work. And finally, what's often lost in this is the third and the final major loss, which is that of the workers themselves. The workers themselves don't have an opportunity to learn and to grow by making mistakes and being coached about how to do it better. I mean, managers, leaders, the definition of that I most understood and have gotten to really feel the most resonance with is the idea that you want to train your people to take your job over at some point, right? And Figliolo mentions this too. When he helped his friend to overcome this issue, the friend then was able to elevate himself in his career because he then was able to show the organization that he was able to grow and do more high-level work, and the people that he had below him were able to step in and do some of the managerial work, right? It's very important to do that. And the other question really here is this idea that it's faster or more efficient to do it yourself. And you know, I think it seems that way many times for many people. And in the shortest of short terms, you know what? It probably is. If you look at it in the course of a couple of days or a couple of weeks maybe in a transition, it probably is quicker for you to do it yourself. But over the long haul, over the medium haul, much less the long haul, over the medium haul, you're going to waste a lot more time doing that yourself again and again and again and again. You're going to waste a lot more resources doing it yourself again and again and again and again than if you have your team get trained on how to do that, right? I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think there's another issue here that you haven't touched on is that particularly if it's something that only you know how to do, then only you know how to do it. And if something happens to you, you get fired, you leave, you quit, you die.
It's the old hit by a bus syndrome.
It's the old hit by a bus,
Yeah.
and nobody else has been
Is cross-trained.
Is cross-trained.
Yep,
You know, it's a danger to the company to allow that.
It's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's exactly right. And because no one person is better than the entire team. No one person, no matter how skilled, no matter how talented, no matter how whatever they are, is ever going to be better than a whole team working together and looking at a problem and being able to do the various pieces of it together. That's very, very important. And there's one more element to this that I think was really important. And it comes from one of our readers who wrote in and had a good quote on this. This is Dirk, your namesake, Dirk Van Putten.
Dirk Van Putten,
Dirk Van Putten, the only other Dirk I know of, actually. Dirk Van Putten, who writes in a lot of our articles, and he had a really interesting point to make on this from the perspective of process redesign. And Dirk writes, could it be that the leadership's ability to design and implement effective processes is a bigger issue? Processes are perfectly designed to get the result the processes are getting. How does one hold an employee accountable to a process that is designed to produce poor results? If you give a screwdriver to pound nails, does it make sense to hold you accountable for the results? Does the whining really represent the employee's frustration with being given a screwdriver to pound a nail? And what he's saying there really is that if all these scientists are whining, and if the manager can't find time to help them and do this work, and it's a lot of minutia, maybe you need to look at that process itself and say, hey, is there a better way of doing this, of getting this information out of the lab and into our CRM or wherever it is you're importing it into? That's another really excellent point.
Well, and by the way, the people who might know how to best improve that process are the people who you aren't allowing to do the process because you're micromanaging it, right? I mean, if you let them do it, they might go, oh, you know, there's an easier way to do this.
to do this. Have you ever thought about doing that? I mean, if you just say, hey, we've always done it this way, the manager's always done it, so I'm going to do it and do it the same way I've always done it. You don't have fresh eyes looking at it and saying, hey, like you say, better way of doing it, let's find out.
Or you're going to do it your way despite what the manager says, and that has its own set of problems.
That's right, that's right. So this is a really interesting, very thought-provoking piece from Mike Figliolo. Ties in with the theme of management that we have going on today. So check that out again. All the articles we're covering today, including that one, are below the player page right down there.
That's right. Okay, you've probably heard the term design of experiments, or DOE. Some of you may even use DOE. If you don't know what DOE is, if that you think it's Department of Energy? Well, it is that, but there is more to it. I encourage you to read Matt Traglia's article, Understanding Design of Experiments, which provides, I think, a really good overview of what design of experiments is and why it is so useful. Now, it's kind of technical, so I'm not going to go into it here, number one, because I don't understand it, and number two, because we don't have time. But I'll give you some highlights. First of all, what is it? And this is great. Basically, design of experiments, or DOE, is just a structured approach for conducting experiments. And by experiments, we can mean anything. What mix of product features and production costs most influence sales margins? What semiconductor process variables have the most effect on process yield? Or, one that we have used, not using DOE, but experiments that we have run, is what variables have the most impact on the number of clicks in a newsletter? In short, DOE can apply it in any situation where you need to manipulate several independent variables, or factors as they're called, in order to optimize one or more dependent variables, or the output. It's useful in product development, and process improvement. So depending on the problem, benefits can include faster time to market, lower development costs, lower operating costs, lower cost of poor quality, or in our case, more clicks in a newsletter. That's something we're always looking for. The value of DOE over, say, one factor at a time experiments, which is what a lot of people do, is that it allows you to change more than one variable at a time when doing experiments, which can be really valuable if you have a lot of variables. Now, I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about. Those of you who know DOE know what I'm talking about, but if you don't, I'll give an example from our own production.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we're trying to figure out what gives us the most clicks. Is it the subject line in an email, or maybe is it the time we send an email out? So we could do an experiment. We could say, okay, well, we're going to use two different headlines, and also we want to see if it's better to send an email at 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, or 10 o'clock in the morning. Now, without DOE, the way that we would do this is we would send a batch of emails with subject line A, and we would send subject line A at 8 o'clock. Mm-hmm. We'd send another batch, subject line A at 9 o'clock, and another batch, subject line A at 10 o'clock. And then we'd send another batch the following day of subject line B at 8 o'clock, right. Subject line B at 9 o'clock, subject line B at 10 o'clock. 6 different experiments in order to get the data that we want. We would crunch the numbers and try to figure out then, okay, well, what headline and which time gave us the best results. 6 different runs. With DOE, it might be possible to do that in 2 runs, or maybe even 1 run. So that's the value of it. It really cuts down on the number of experimental runs if you're having to vary a lot of variables, because it allows you to vary multiple variables at one time. So most of us, including us here at the Digest, don't understand DOE or don't know how to do it, so we don't. So like I said, we use the tried and true method of just running multiple experiments where we keep everything the same except only vary one variable. But like I said, it's time consuming, and for some process related industries, the one factor at a time method can be either too time consuming or too costly, or in most cases, both, to do one factor at a time. So this is where DOE comes in, which allows you, as I said, to cut down on the number of experimental runs. With DOE, you're changing multiple variables at a time to still get results that point to the most promising outcome. Now, Treglia does spend some time going into why DOE works, and like I said, it's too technical to try to explain here. Now, Treglia points out that there have been many who have tried DOE and pointed out that it hasn't been successful for them. There's several reasons for this, and I want to touch on a couple because these 2 I think are kind of most critical. The first we can just call garbage in, garbage out, and he's referring to, let's say, the excessive measurement error. However you're measuring, if you have a lot of measurement error in your system, or your measurement system isn't accurate or stable, then any data generated from the data collection is going to be so noisy that it's going to thwart your DOE efforts. So garbage in, garbage out. The next one I think is really probably the most important, of all, and it's really a lack of understanding of the scientific and engineering principles in your system. DOE is statistics, and with any statistical approach to a process, you really have to understand your process. You can't just throw these numbers into, a piece of software that does DOE and expect to get meaningful results. You might stumble on meaningful results, but it's going to be an accident. If you don't understand your process, DOE is kind of not going to give you the results that you're expecting. So according to Treglia, you need an in-depth knowledge of science and engineering in your process in order to choose the factors and the levels used in those factors in the experiment and in interpreting the results of the analysis. So what I just said also describes why maybe a lot of people don't use DOE. It does involve either one person, a single person with good statistical chops, good communication skills, and solid engineering or scientific knowledge of the process, or it takes several people, each with particular strengths in different areas, and most of us don't have either of those situations. So what do we do? I mean, you know, there's value in DOE to examine complex processes, and you need to have all these skill sets. So in that case, you know, it just might make most sense to bring in someone from the outside who can do the DOE analysis for you. Basically, we're talking a consultant. But it really can be a cost saver, and that was kind of his point is, not everybody has the skill set within their organization, particularly if you're a small company, to do a DOE, but the cost benefits you get out of a DOE may make sense to bring in an outside consultant to help you do that. It's a one-time cost. They help you set it up, you get your results, and this may actually result in cost savings either within your process or, as we pointed out, using it in marketing, give you the best things to do in order to increase your sales margins.
Yeah, it may make sense. It depends on what you're doing, what your process is. You know, for certain organizations that are doing less things, it may, like we talk about the amount of things we do.
Sure.
We really don't do that much, many
yeah,
things.
for us to bring in a consultant for DOE probably wouldn't make sense. The one factor at a time, sure, why not?
It's fine, it's good enough. But I mean, for manufacturing, certainly if you're looking at short runs and you need to analyze costs.
Or things like semiconductor industry, which uses DOE a lot.
Absolutely. And that's really, really critical, and I think that's good advice that, you know, you don't want to botch that up. You know, if you can bring in somebody to help you, you're going to be better off. You're going to do it more efficiently going forward.
Right.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay.
Oh, before I forget, tomorrow is Pi Day.
Yes, it is.
3.14 for those of you who keep track of such things. So,
we actually looked it up. There's a Pi second.
That's right. So Pi Day, actually this year Pi Day is Super Pi Day, 3.1415, so March 14th, 2015. But following that is 1415.
92643, I think, 92653. So apparently the deal is tomorrow on the 15th, on Sunday, that would be, is at 9:26:53, I think, is the time.
Right. It's Pi second.
Is Pi second. So everybody take note.
Set your watch.
Yeah. So look out for that on Sunday.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's our show for the week. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you again to Bob Miliani for coming on and guesting.
And his book, which was Nobody is Exempt. Nobody is exempt from improvement.
Right. Nobody's exempt from improvement. His book. Go out and check that out. Good book, good read. So go out and find that on Amazon. Thank you all for joining us. You all have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
So long.
Bye.